You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast, the best baseball show in the world, the best baseball show anyone's ever known was possible. We are presented by Inside Arkansas. I am Andrew Ellis. It is a Wednesday. It is May 21st. The SEC tournament is underway. The action is heating up. A&M got a big win today, keeps their season alive. We'll see how things play out before Arkansas makes their first appearance in the SEC tournament. That'll be set currently for 3 p.m. on Friday. They will play the winner of Florida and Ole Miss, who are going to play tomorrow. Actually, that's a lie. I think they play today. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll see who Arkansas's opponent is. And tomorrow on the show, we'll kind of take a little bit of a peek at it, maybe discuss some of the plans that Arkansas has for the SEC tournament. But on today's show, we got a fun episode for you guys. We're going to talk a lot about pitching because, again, I wanted to use this week as a kind of time to reset, reanalyze. On Sunday, we kind of looked back at the season and looked back at what Arkansas accomplished, what all they did, how they finished. Now we're kind of inching towards the actual postseason. The postseason technically starts at the SEC tournament, but I think we all agree the real postseason is next weekend. That's when things, you got to have all your ducks in a row. You got to have all your chips ready to push them into the middle. That's when all the stakes are the highest. And so as we inch closer to that, we're going to be taking a little bit more of a look at this Razorback team, seeing how prepared they are for the postseason. And a big part of that is pitching. We can talk about the lineup if you guys want to. The only thing is there's really not a ton to talk about. I mean, of course, will they hit good? Will they hit bad? We can have those discussions, but there's not a lot of spots up for grabs. We've kind of got some pretty solid clarity with Gabe Frazier returning back from injury. Maybe we see him. Maybe Rocco Pepe shows some signs of life, but it seems like Reese Robinette has a pretty firm grasp on that first base spot. There's not really any controversy anywhere else. I don't know if there's a ton of conversations to be had, especially now that Logan Maxwell is back to 100% and swinging it the way he has. So again, if you guys have questions about the lineup, I'm more than happy to answer them, and we can talk about that. But there's really not much to discuss other than this team can swing it pretty well. Let's hope they do it in the postseason. But in terms of pitching, I think there are a lot more questions, and we are getting a lot of clarity in terms of what Arkansas has, what they're capable of, and what needs to happen for this team to be successful in the postseason. So we will be updating the Circle of Trust. We have not pulled out the Circle of Trust in a while. Honestly, it's been kind of a mess to keep up with of who's starting, who's available out of the pen, who's being asked to do this, who's healthy, who's not. We are getting close now to having a little bit more clarity. We've got 11 names on this updated Circle of Trust, spoiler alert, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how we feel about it, how things line up, and what roles each guy goes into. And I'm sure you guys will have some arguments as to some guys that I left off the Circle of Trust that absolutely should be in. But we're going to look at that. We're also going to look at some past years because you guys know I like to learn from history. I like to compare and contrast this Razorback team to ones that we've seen in the past. And luckily for the Razorbacks, and when I say luckily, if you look back the last decade of Arkansas baseball, we've seen every type of team you can imagine. We've seen every type of postseason result outside of course, winning the national championship. But we've seen a Razorback team get to the national title series. We've seen a Razorback team get to Omaha and go 0-2. We've seen a Razorback team lose in the Super Regional. We've obviously seen a Razorback team lose in a regional. We also in 2016 saw a team not make the tournament at all. And so we have a pretty decent range, as consistent, as successful as Arkansas baseball has been in terms of postseason results and postseason finish. We've actually seen a wide variety of options. And so it's not as simple as, hey, this team went to Omaha and they had this, so we have to have that. And now we got to make it sure it all matches. One thing that I learned as I was kind of looking back at it is there is no like cut and dry formula for how Razorback handles how the Razorback coaching staff handles their pitching in the postseason. But it is kind of cool to compare and contrast sort of what options they had, what options they were working with, and how that played out for them in the postseason. We're going to talk about all that. But before we do that, I do want to tell you guys, we are brought to you by Basis Health, who is changing the game in healthcare. Basis Health is changing the way healthcare is delivered by providing mobile medical visits at the comfort of your home. A doctor will come to your home for urgent care, primary care, IV hydration, and more. Basis Health, they are here for you when and where you need them most. You can learn more today at basishealth.org. If you're like Curtis and you get eaten up by a pit bull on your daily run, hit up Basis Health. They can handle urgent care. They can handle things like that. They can also come to you for just your primary care. You can schedule appointments. They'll come to see you at your house, and We appreciate them and all they do for us. Shout out to Basis Health. And again, learn more at basishealth.org. They can tell you a lot more than I can. So again, we're going to talk about pitching here, and we're going to look back at the last 4 Razorback teams, as well as secret surprise team later. And then we're gonna, before I show you Arkansas's current circle of trust, I want to look back at some of these past years. And guys, I got to be honest. So you've heard me talk a lot about Arkansas pitching, going back to the offseason, and we talked about the potential. And hey, is this maybe the deepest Razorback pitching staff we've seen? Is this the most talented Razorback pitching staff we've seen? Hell, at one point we were even saying, hey, could this be the best starting rotation we've seen? That was a big resounding no. But I do think that, I've always had some level of confidence for this pitching staff, given the pieces they have, the talent that's on the roster, and of course, the architect behind it all, Matt Hobbs and Dave Van Horn. They just there's a lot of benefit of the doubt that goes in there. And I've felt better and better about Arkansas's pitching after these last few weeks. Some things have fallen into place. You've gotten some key outings from some guys like Will McIntyre, guys like Cole Gibler. Zach Root didn't have a great start last week, but has started to look more like the Zach Root that we hoped we were getting, the Zach Root that we know we're capable of seeing. And of course, he's a first-team All-SEC pitcher, and so should make you feel a little bit better, I guess. But there's been some positive developments that have made me feel better about Arkansas pitching. I got to be honest with you guys. As I was going through and looking back at some of these past years and comparing kind of in my mind this Razorback pitching staff to some past ones, I feel better about the pitching staff, and maybe you will too. I don't know. If not, if nothing else, it'll just be fun to take this little trip down memory lane. So let's start with a very controversial Razorback squad, a very controversial Razorback pitching staff. Y'all know the meme that's like the Lamborghini in a really ugly garage and this like ratty house, and it's sitting out there, and it'll be like, so-and-so in this, this Razorback offense, or whatever, like Andrew Armstrong in this Razorback offense or something like that. That is pretty much how I feel about this 2021 Circle of Trust. So let's take a look at it, man. 7 names. Now, we always say this, and the number varies. It's not 7 every year. It's not 9. It kind of varies in terms of how many arms Arkansas goes into the postseason with. But I do want to remind you guys, this is not based on like my opinion and like who I thought were the best guys or who I think, I trusted or whatever. I just kind of looked at it as what happened in the postseason, who pitched those high leverage innings, who did Arkansas put on the mound when they felt like they, the game was on the line. And it, that's basically where I put the cutoff at. And like I said, some year, like this year, it's 7 in 2021. For this year's Arkansas team, I have 11 names on there. There's some years where it's 8, some 9. It's somewhere in that range. But we always say things always shrink once you get to the postseason. If you are using 12 pitchers on the weekend, the closer you get to June, you're maybe going to use, maybe it'll cut it to 10. Maybe you cut it to 8. This 2021 Razorback team, which by the way, finished the year 50-13 in the Super Regional, of course, lost to NC State as the number 1 overall seed. Disappointing, heartbreaking. We had to end Kevin Kopps' career that way. This Razorback team was unique because they developed a formula pretty early in the season, and that formula was Patrick Wicklander, you go give us 6 on Friday night to start. Kevin Kopps will throw the final 3, and then he's going to come back on Sunday, and he could throw anywhere from 2 to 6. And that was kind of their formula. They leaned heavily on Kevin Kopps, who, of course, won the Golden Spikes, was the best reliever in college baseball, really the best reliever in college baseball we've ever seen. And outside of that, Arkansas really struggled to piece things together, and it really wasn't a super long list of guys. I think in hindsight, I look at this roster, and there are some names like Evan Taylor's a guy who was in the Circle of Trust for Arkansas in 2022. I think in hindsight, they put a lot of pressure on Caden Monk. Maybe could have let Evan Taylor take some of that work. Connor Nolan was banged up throughout the year, so he only finished the year with about 14 innings. He missed a huge chunk of the season. That's a tough break, but he's a guy that in the postseason, maybe you probably should have been able to get something out of. Ryan Koshu is a guy they leaned heavily on. Cole Ramage is another guy that I think he threw like 25 innings for Arkansas this year and had been in the Circle of Trust in past years. Zeb Vermillion, another one. Like there's a few arms that were kind of in the mix, but by the time it got to the postseason, these were the 7 guys that Arkansas were using, and it really didn't get further than that. So again, you had Patrick Wicklander as a starter there. You see the numbers with a 2.09 ERA, unreal. He was great. He was all SEC, one of the best, most consistent starters in the country. That was a huge part of Arkansas's formula. You see Kevin Kopps in the middle there with a 0.90 ERA. Outside of that, you had Lyle Lockhart with a 4.47 ERA. Arkansas didn't really trust him a ton, like he had a very short leash more often than not. had a short leash in game 2 of the Super Regional, which I feel like came back to bite Arkansas. Caleb Bolden was kind of more of an opener because they didn't really stretch him out much. He had some moments here and there, but finishes with a 4.50 ERA. He was their other starting option. He started game 1 of the regional that year. It ended up being actually Kevin Kopps, of course, that started game 3 of the Supers. They went Wicklander, Lockhart, Kopps in that series. And so you had those top 4 guys. And then out of the bullpen, again, they used Caden Monk a lot. They used him twice a weekend. And his first outing would always be better than his second. They used him to the point of exhaustion. And then you have Ryan Koshu there, who's kind of their go-to right-on-right guy, had that really good changeup, would always be used for like 5 outs. Like they could never really stretch him out super long, but he gave them some quality innings. Jackson Wiggins, people forget, started the regional final on the mound for Arkansas, also started the SEC championship game that year. He also closed some games for Arkansas. By the time they got to the postseason, their trust in Jackson Wiggins had been shaken a little bit. Of course, he was a true freshman, so it was always kind of that in the back of your mind. But this was it, man. Like this was Arkansas' circle of trust, and it was pretty much, hey, if you're going to beat Arkansas, you had to beat these pitchers. And in game 3, they were able to beat Kevin Kopps. Of course, Arkansas's offense didn't help them too much, but it was a pretty bleak circle of trust. Like really not a ton of, like, I mean, hell, there's 7 names in this group. And how many of those guys that I just say they didn't really trust all that much? I mean, Caleb Bolden would not say they had the utmost confidence in him. Lyle Lockhart would not say they had the utmost confidence in him. Jackson Wiggins, they certainly did not have the utmost confidence in as a freshman. And so that was kind of it. And so when you look at some other Razorback teams and you compare it to this 2021 team, it's actually kind of amazing they won as much as they did because they really just did not have the depth in the pitching staff. And the lineup was solid, but did not get it done in the end in the postseason. Now let's move on to 2022. Now this is a Razorback team that made it to Omaha, of course. You had a really consistent innings eater, really solid stabilizing force in Connor Nolan as your Friday night guy, as a right-hander. Not the most electric stuff we've seen, but a guy that just knows how to pitch, threw a ton of innings for Arkansas, really set the tone for this pitching staff. Will McIntyre, you see with a 2.59 ERA there, worked his way into being the number 2 starter, had some massive performances for Arkansas in the postseason. That's a guy that by the end of it, you trusted more than really anybody. Hagen Smith, of course, was your game 3 starter there. He started the year in the rotation as the number 2 guy, got moved to the bullpen a little bit, had that awesome save in the Stillwater Regional Final, had a save in game 2 of the Supers also. I guess he might have been actually the winning pitcher there. Also wound up making a start in Omaha, basically served as Arkansas's game 3 starter. And then you see there in the middle, Jackson Wiggins, a guy that started the year in the starting rotation, kind of got phased out, started a game in the regional. By the time they actually got to Omaha, Jackson Wiggins really wasn't in the circle of trust. Like they were kind of throwing him in low leverage situations. He had maybe kind of run out of gas a little bit there. Zebulon Vermillion, people forget. I know he was kind of a controversial figure. Maybe wasn't the most reliable, but Arkansas got a ton of key innings out of him. They did a really good job. As much as we talk about, Carson Wiggins and how Arkansas used him this year, or Christian Fouch, how Arkansas used him last year, where they were very careful with the guy as like a potential setup option. They would ask him to get 2, maybe 3 outs, maybe 4 outs at the most. Like they really didn't put a ton on his plate, and he was able to be very effective. They kind of figured that out with Zebulon Vermillion because they had used him in past years in other roles and he wasn't effective. They found the exact way to use him. He actually got Arkansas some pretty key outs down the stretch there in 2022. Brady Tiger was a lights out closer for Arkansas in the regular season, hit kind of that freshman wall right as they went to Hoover. And so in the postseason, in the NCAA tournament, they really didn't use him a ton. Cole Ramage is a guy that I think he threw 65 innings for Arkansas this year, was just a consistent innings eater out of the bullpen. You see the ERA 4.80 there, like not crazy numbers, but he certainly was in that circle of trust. A big part of Arkansas's formula in this 2022 season, Evan Taylor was unreal as a lefty, ate a ton of innings for Arkansas. They would use him twice on the weekend. They used him like twice in every single one of the postseason weekends too. Like they used Evan Taylor a good bit. He had his ups and downs, but he was certainly a circle of trust guy and was a big part of them getting to Omaha. Zach Morris, who started the year kind of out of the mix a little bit. Like it took him a while to get phased in there. He finished the year really strong. actually ended up starting a game in the Stillwater Regional, started a game in Omaha, didn't go well for him, but comes back and gets a huge save in an elimination game for Arkansas. So Evan Taylor and Zach Morris were able to kind of piece it together. You got some innings out of Vermillion there. You got some innings out of Ramage. Really, by the time the team got to the NCAA tournament, a lot of these arms were a little bit running on fumes. And so it wasn't you see, I guess, how many names you got? 3, 7, you got 9 names here. But I wouldn't say it was the most sturdy 9-man pitching staff. Like, we had a ton of confidence in a lot of those guys. And this is a team that went to Omaha, by the way. This is a team that was on the doorstep of the national championship game. And so they were kind of right there. And I think if you compare this pitching staff this year to that one in 2022, you probably would take this year's pitching staff, right? And I don't think it's like a massive gap. I mean, hell, I really wish Arkansas had someone on Friday who was as consistent as Connor Noland. But from a talent standpoint, I think Zach Root's a more talented option. But you'd probably take that stability with Connor Noland. But the rest of the starting rotation, until Will McIntyre kind of emerged, really all year didn't have that stability. And then again, Will McIntyre kind of stepped up and was that guy for Arkansas. I think if Arkansas is going to resemble the run that this 2022 team went on, obviously Gage Wood and Will McIntyre, very different pitchers, very different skill sets, very different personalities, very different everything. But I think Gage Wood really needs to step up and be that number 2 starter. And we'll kind of talk about that there in a second. But when you kind of compare and contrast this pitching staff to the 2022 one, I think you definitely like the depth a lot more with the current one that we have. But I think that 2022 team is an interesting barometer because, again, they were right there. Like, we can criticize and we can point and say, oh, actually, that pitching staff kind of sucked. And, was that lineup really that good? That team was right there, man. Like, that team went almost that was the second best finish Arkansas's ever had in the postseason. That was pretty much one of the best teams in school history right there in 2022. And so it is kind of interesting just to see. I mean, you always hear people say, you need all this pitching. You need 10 guys. You need 3 aces on the mound to start. You need 3 closers. You need 3 left. Like, you need all this stuff. But here I am showing you a 2022 team that kind of pieced it together a little bit. Now, this is maybe the most disgusting circle of trust that we're about to look at. This is the 2023 group. Now, if you remember, this is the 2023 team that Jackson Wiggins is on this roster, did not pitch an inning because he tore his UCL to start the year. He was supposed to be the Friday night guy. You had Hagen Smith, who was, of course, all SEC with Paul Skeens. He was very good for Arkansas. Hunter Holland was banged up a lot, was a key consistent force for Arkansas. We'll pull up the whole list here now. And I have Brady Tigert in there as that number 3 starter. He had a 3.2 ERA. If you remember, this is Brady Tigert returning from injury. He missed like the whole middle portion of that season. And then they brought him back. I guess it was for the A&M series in early or in like mid-April. And then they kind of built him up from there. He wound up having a 5 2/3 inning start for Arkansas in the NCAA tournament. Wound up being a pretty, solid, reliable arm for Arkansas. Would have been nice to see what he could have done down the stretch there. And hell, they needed him, man, because you look down here, you see Will McIntyre there in the middle with a 5.07 ERA. Of course, Will McIntyre, coming off the heels of what he did in 2022, had a ton of benefit of the doubt built up. And people, I think, forget, Will actually pitched really well for Arkansas down the stretch. He had started the year in the starting rotation, the weekend rotation. Did not go well for them here. Go well for him there. He kind of got phased out of that role. Then they started piggybacking him with Brady Tigert when he returned from injury. And Will McIntyre actually finished the year on a little bit of a tear, was a closing option for Arkansas, did a really good job. So I know people see him in the circle of trust and they're like, oh, I never trusted Will McIntyre. Well, for this 2023 team, he was pretty much as reliable as any arm on the team, which says a lot because, you see he had an ERA over 5. Gage Wood, of course, has a 4.80 ERA. He was closing games for Arkansas this season as a freshman, did a great job, but similar to Brady Tigert as a freshman in 2022, Gage kind of hit that freshman wall. And by the time the postseason rolled around, they really stopped using him in high leverage situations, but I had to include him in the circle of trust just because, he had like 7 saves that year. Zach Morris coming off his great 2022 season, it just did not go his way in 2023. He wound up transferring to TCU. Parker Coyle was a freshman. You see those 2 left-handed ERAs. Zach Morris, 7.64. Parker Coyle, 6.55. You compare that with some of the left-handed pitchers Arkansas has on this year's team, Parker Coyle included in that now as a junior, Cole Gibler, Landon Beidelshe's even. There's a lot more stability with this year's group. And then I threw Ben Bybee and Christian Fouch in there. Both of those guys pitched a decent amount down the stretch for Arkansas. Neither of them neither them nor Parker Coyle probably should have been in those situations. I don't think they were quite ready for it. And this is, of course, the Arkansas pitching staff that got their shit pushed in by that TCU team in the regional. And so you look at it and you're like, man, how could this TCU team have done this to Arkansas? Well, if you look at the circle of trust, it's actually not that surprising that this team got lit up in the regional in the biggest situation of their season. This actually kind of hurt my heart to look at. And by the way, Dylan Carter was on this team. He actually tore his UCL a few weeks earlier, so he wasn't in the mix for Arkansas in that postseason. I should also mention, I guess it was the next year after. We'll talk about Brady Tigert was coming back from injury in 2024. Brady Tigert, which I'll go ahead and pull it up now. Brady Tigert listed there as the number 2 guy. Brady Tigert actually did not pitch in the regional for Arkansas. He was not on the roster. Was dealing with some soreness there. So this is the 2024 circle of trust now that we're looking at. This is probably the closest of all these ones that I've showed you. This is probably the closest one that like rivals the depth that Arkansas had last year. And really, it doesn't have the depth. It just kind of had that front line. Obviously, Hagen Smith with his 2.04 ERA. He was very good, although not good in that regional start. Gabe Gackel there is the closer there, the top bullpen option, had a 2.32 ERA. He was unreal, similar to 2021, where you kind of had this formula of just Wicklander Cops. It was pretty much Hagen Smith, Gabe Gackel, and then outside of that, they were just kind of piecing it together. Christian Fauci had the under 1 ERA. They were very good with how they used him. Mason Molina at the 4.47 ERA, similar to Lyle Lockhart, like just kind of a left-handed arm that you knew could start games, but Arkansas didn't really trust them down the stretch. Gage Wood was a guy that was kind of a quasi multi-inning reliever, had some starting opportunities as well. Wound up kind of, I believe, did Gage Wood start the final game of the year against SEMO? I think he did. He was kind of in that mix there. You see the 4.46 ERA. He wasn't bad. He was a solid option for Arkansas. But again, Arkansas really just was kind of, after Hagen Smith, it was kind of a free-for-all. Just anybody that can get some innings for Arkansas. Jake Faraday, I included there, had a 1.84 ERA. Only threw like 16 innings on the year, but he had some clutch innings down the stretch for Arkansas. Felt he deserved a right to be in that circle of trust. Stone Hewlett, of course, was the go-to lefty for Arkansas with a 3.46 ERA. Parker Coyle, who had the 7.23 ERA, did not have a great sophomore year, but he did pitch a lot better down the stretch. By the time the postseason rolled around, I think they actually did kind of trust him a little bit. And then Will McIntyre and Ben Bybee were kind of the two guys I didn't really know where to put them. Will McIntyre started the year. I mean, you think he finished the year with like, maybe 80 innings for Arkansas or something crazy like that. He threw a ton, or no, I guess it was 87 innings he threw in 2024 or 2023, and then threw like 60 something in 2024. Had started the year as Arkansas's most important bullpen arm. Kind of lost it there down the stretch for a while. By the time the postseason rolled around, I don't think they were like super confident in him, but he did pitch a ton of innings in the postseason still. And Ben Bybee had a really good outing to finish his year. I wouldn't say he was a bona fide circle of trust guy, but I felt like both of those guys kind of deserve the nod. And so again, and this, by the way, is a pitching staff that was like across the board, one of the top in the SEC, one of the top nationally. Obviously, a lot of that was because of Hagen Smith and because of Gabe Gackel and the work that they did that kind of ate up. You can cover a multitude of woes if you have a Friday night starter that gives you 6 every weekend, and you have a freshman closer that had been lights out that was giving you 2 or 3 every weekend. That can shorten things up pretty quickly. And even as deficient as some of Arkansas's other options were, they were still among the top nationally in pitching and all that. And if you compare the numbers, I think I did an episode, I guess it was a couple months ago now, where we looked back at just offensive and pitching stats from the last 5-6 years. That 2024 pitching staff was like head and shoulders above most of these. But of course, you saw in the postseason, they were very susceptible to, if someone beat Hagen Smith, they were toast, which is what happened in the postseason. And of course, you also had one of the more inept offenses we've ever seen under Dave Van Horn at Arkansas, or at least in the last decade, I should say. One more pitching staff from the past years that I wanted to compare it to, because really what I showed you guys a lot of was a lot of pitching staffs that honestly weren't that great. Even the ones that, like, even the 2022 one that pieced it together and went to the College World Series, on paper, it's not like they were like, lighting it up necessarily. The 2021 pitching staff had pretty solid numbers overall, but again, it was kind of really all 2 guys. And so you maybe, listen to this and you're like, well, what do we learn? That we're better than these mediocre pitching staffs, 2 teams that lost in the regional, 1 that lost in the super, and then 1 that went to Omaha, but had to kind of scratch and claw their way there. Like, what did we really learn? So I also wanted to pull up the 2018 Circle of Trust because, again, you guys heard me say it 1,000 times now. The 2018 team is the best team in school history. It should have won the national title. It's kind of the standard in which we compare everything to. I think you guys would be surprised at how small this Circle of Trust is. Here it is. Now, it is a small circle of trust, but as you know, it's about how you use it. It's not about the length. It's about how you use it. And this Razorback 2018 pitching staff really just had, I mean, maybe more than any Razorback team I can ever really remember, they had a very firm understanding of who they wanted on the mound and what situations they wanted those guys on the mound in. Blaine Knight, of course, 14-0 this season. One of the best starting pitchers in school history, an all-time great Hog, one that we'll always remember. He was the drink that stirred the straw that stirred the drink. Every time I try and say a stupid cliche saying, I start fumbling over my words. It's almost like God's way of telling me to shut up. But no, Blaine Knight was really, I mean, he was a force for this Razorback team, and he was such a consistent, you just knew what you were getting every single week. You knew he was going to work deep into the game. You knew he was going to fill up the strike zone. He would get a lead. He'd get up 6-0, and he'd maybe give up a home run here or there. And so, yeah, the 2.80 ERA, not the most dominant we've ever seen at Arkansas, and the strikeout numbers weren't like blowing you away or anything. But this is a big part of Arkansas's formula, and I use that term formula a lot because when you're in the postseason and you're trying to decipher all these innings, when you have a guy, and I would say Casey Murphy also fit this criteria. Shout out to the big lefty from Rogers, Arkansas. He and Blaine Knight combined for basically 12 innings every single week. And especially down the stretch, like you just knew those guys were going to go deep into the game. And that's kind of what allowed Arkansas to have such a short rotation there in the bullpen. Like it wasn't a ton of guys they mixed and matched. And by the way, I know some of you are going to say, well, I mean, Arkansas had other arms, Caleb Bolden as a freshman, Bryce Bonnin as a freshman, and Evan Lee was on that team. You go back and look at the postseason, these were the only guys that pitched in any high leverage situations like at all. And really, you see Matt Cronin, who, by the way, set the school record for saves in this season, which he set it even in a year where he missed a couple weeks due to mono and kind of came back and took a while to get his footing. Of course, should have gotten him. He got the save in game 1 of the College World Series finals. Should have gotten the save in game 2, but the fly ball was not caught. But Matt Cronin was awesome as Arkansas's closer, and they would kind of stretch him out, make him go 2 or 3 innings sometimes as well. Barilowski and Jake Reindl were the very clear bridges. You'd have Blaine Knight go 6, you'd have Barilowski go 2, you'd have Matt Cronin go 1. Like it was a pretty foolproof formula. They would kind of piece it together. Jake Reindl actually had some struggles for Arkansas in this postseason. Like he kind of had to battle through some weird outings there, but Isaiah Campbell, by the way, is another guy I didn't really mention here. Had the 4.26 ERA. I know you see the name and you think, oh yeah, Isaiah Campbell, love that guy. This was Isaiah Campbell before he was really Isaiah Campbell. They had a very, very short leash on Isaiah Campbell. Matter of fact, I say it a lot, but did not get a single out in his regional start. Jake Reindl had to come in and throw 7 innings in relief, which again just kind of speaks to Arkansas really didn't mess around and put a bunch of guys they didn't want to have out there on the mound. Cole Ramage, by the way, was a true freshman. You saw him on the Circle of Trust for 2022. Cole Ramage, people forget, would have been the winning pitcher had Arkansas caught that foul ball in fly territory, or that fly ball in foul territory. Cole Ramage would have been the winning pitcher of Arkansas's national championship winning game, which is always kind of funny to look back on. And as a matter of fact, during this 2018 season, we all looked at Cole Ramage and we were like, this is going to be a key arm for Arkansas over the next few years. I know you guys ended up hating Cole Ramage. If you go back to 2018, he pitched in a ton of high leverage situations. He looked pretty good doing it, and we kind of all felt good about him moving forward. Of course, his career, he didn't turn out to be this world beater or anything, but he was a bona fide Circle of Trust guy. And his freshman class featured guys like Jackson Rutledge, who's pitching in the big leagues, Bryce Bonnin, who I don't know where he's at, but he was like a 3rd-round pick as well. Caleb Bolden, of course, who we talked about. Like Zeb Vermillion was also in that freshman class. Like there were a ton of notable freshmen on that Razorback pitching staff. And Cole Ramage ended up being as valuable as, he was the most valuable that season. And he pitched way more down the stretch than any of those guys. So those are 5 different teams I just showed you, 2 of which went to Omaha. a lot of which won a lot of games, a lot of which, one of which was the number one overall seed. And so you kind of got to see the full spectrum of what Arkansas pitching has looked like over the last, half decade or so. Let's go ahead and pull up now the 2025 Circle of Trust, the cool little graphic here that you guys have seen before. So we'll start at the top. By the way, I guess I should right off the bat, I put Aiden Jimenez in as a starter. Who knows? We'll see if he ends up getting a start this weekend for Arkansas. We'll see if Arkansas even plays 3 games. Who knows what the hell Arkansas is going to do. But I did like that, they got him his first start last week. Didn't necessarily go well for him. So maybe they'll go back to Landon Beidelshees. Maybe they'll get creative and go Gabe Gackle. Maybe they'll do something off the wall that nobody expects. But for now, I just kind of have Aiden Jimenez in that spot. And if you want to, you can move him out and move Beidelshees in, like whatever you got to do. But I just kind of am assuming with, what's played out lately, he might get another start. And I think it'd be nice if Arkansas could get him one more opportunity in Hoover before they're done. But you look down at the bottom there, your closing options, Gabe Gackle, Christian Fouch, which we all kind of know. Now, of course, Will McIntyre just closed a game for Arkansas, so certainly he could be viewed as a closing option as well. Parker Coyle has picked up some saves for Arkansas this year. He's closed some games, certainly a closing option. Landon Beidelshees has some experience closing. Of course, if Aiden Jimenez is not starting games, he's going to be a closing option as well. And hell, Dylan Carter's been throwing the ball as well as any Razorback reliever. Certainly wouldn't mind having him to close games, but I just kind of compartmentalized it this way. So you've got 3 righty options. Dylan Carter, who, by the way, has a 2.18 ERA in 33 innings this season. Opponents hitting just 2.02 against him. He's been really good. Will McIntyre, who, by the way, has a 2.59 ERA, 24 and a third innings, 28 strikeouts, 3 walks. Opponents hitting just 163 against Will McIntyre. And Ben Bybee, who has a 4.25 ERA, 36 innings, 41 strikeouts. Opponents hitting 262 against him. So a little bit of a step off there statistically, but 3 righties. And Ben Bybee, by the way, is, I would say there's like a, you could put like a little asterisk. Like I think they trust Carter and McIntyre a good bit more than they trust Bybee. But Bybee did throw the ball pretty well last week. Was able to put up a 0 in his 1 inning of work. I'm sure he's going to get some opportunities, and we'll love to see that. You go over to the lefties, you have Parker Coyle with a 1.59 ERA and 17 innings of work this year. Opponents hitting 250 against him. Cole Gibler, who has a 3.86 ERA, 23 innings pitched. Opponents hitting just 222 against him. My favorite number on Cole Gibler from his freshman year, 45 strikeouts and 9 walks in 23 innings. So basically 2 strikeouts per inning and then 1 walk every 3 innings, essentially. Cole Gibler has been very effective for Arkansas. I think after his outing last week, where, by the way, he's another guy that could close some games for Arkansas. Hell, maybe he'll end up starting games for Arkansas. I think he's a bona fide Circle of Trust guy at this point, and I think most of you would agree. Landon Beidelshees has not necessarily had the best year, has not gone his way. He's got a 5.10 ERA, 54 innings. Opponents hitting 267 against him, 57 strikeouts there. Does have a very low walk rate, only has 19 walks in 54 innings. There's also a lot of experience on the side of Landon Beidelshees. At the absolute very least, I think he's a left-on-left option and an overqualified one at that. Could end up being a starting option. Could end up getting some mid-relief, some setup work, maybe close a game or 2. Like, I think Landon Beidelshees, I know some people are not crazy about him, but I think he's a no-doubt Circle of Trust guy. And again, you compare him to some of these other names that I just listed off for you from past years, you could do a lot worse than a guy who's got 200 career innings and has, started games on Friday night before and has pitched a ton in the SEC. Like, I think he's a very worthy inclusion in this Circle of Trust. And I expect him to continue to get work in legitimate situations for Arkansas. But going back to this starting rotation, of course, you've got Zach Rude, who was recently named first team All SEC. So maybe that makes you guys feel a lot better about him. I don't know. Really, I think him and Gage Wood are the two that, I look back at some of these other teams and they had this clear formula of, hey, these 2 guys, we need them to be really good. And then we can figure out the rest from there. What's weird about this Arkansas team is, whereas a lot of these past teams, you're saying, hey, we know these 2 guys are going to be good and we'll just piece together the rest. Arkansas has become elite at piecing together the rest. Like they've consistently found ways to disperse this bullpen and make it work. A lot of that is Arkansas has 6 relievers this season who have at least 17 innings pitched and an ERA under 4. So are those numbers anything crazy? No, but there's a lot of guys that Arkansas can turn to. And so it's weird that Arkansas, it's like a reverse where you're kind of unsure about the frontline guys. You don't know if you have those top two guys, but you know you have a bunch of options deep down. And ultimately for me, man, like when we talk about this Razorback pitching staff, and I'm reading off a lot of numbers here. We talk a lot about numbers. We talk a lot about what have you done for me lately. And so when you look at guys like Zach Root and Gage Wood, who, in their last couple starts, maybe haven't had the best success, I could see why there's some skepticism. For me, it's a lot of like, hey, you have guys that are here to do roles. You have guys that were brought in for specific reasons. At some point, it's time for those dudes to be dudes. And I think for Zach Root, a guy who was named first team All SEC, so clearly the SEC coaches view him as that guy. Clearly the Arkansas pitching staff views him as a frontline guy because they've been starting him on Friday nights every week. Clearly the MLB scouts who have him as a projected potential first-round pick, apparently all the draft guys, they view him as that guy. It's time for Zach Root to step up and be that guy. And we've seen flashes of it. I mean, hell, it wasn't even 2 weeks ago that he threw 8 scoreless innings against Texas, the number one team in the country at the time. It wasn't too long ago that he threw 6 innings. He had a really quality start, only allowed 2 runs, outpitched another first-team All-SEC guy in Cade Anderson. So we know Zach Root can pitch with the best of them. We know he has that type of ceiling. I just think we just need that floor a little bit higher. We don't need the super high variance. We know your ceiling's up here, and your floor can sometimes be down here. Let's just raise that floor a little bit. I think if Zach Root and Gage Wood can get to being consistent 5-6 inning guys from here on out, it changes the way you view everything. And again, Gage Wood, everything I just said about Zach Root certainly applies to Gage Wood. He's a guy that has developed a ton of buzz in the scouting world. I've seen him as high as top 30 on some of these mock drafts, on some of these draft boards. Will he end up going there? I don't know, but we're talking about one of the most talented arms in the country, a guy whose fastball is consistently 96, 98. The stuff is certainly there. The mentality is certainly there. I would even say the strike throwing ability is undoubtedly there. Hell, Gage Wood so far on the season, let me see here. Yeah, has 37 strikeouts and 5 walks in 19 innings pitched. Like that, I mean, obviously small sample size, but it's like you're throwing strikes. You've got great stuff. You've got some experience under your belt. You've been in these moments before. Your arm should be fairly fresh because you haven't thrown a ton. And I know they've been ramping up his workload here lately, but he hasn't thrown more than 80 pitches in a start this season. I think it's time for Gage Wood to hit the ground running. We'll see if either one of those guys, I'd imagine at least one, maybe both guys will pitch in Hoover this weekend. It would make us all feel a lot better if they would just kind of show us some of that stability. But I think that's kind of the big question. And then, of course, that game 3 spot, whether it's Jimenez, whether it's Beidelshees, whether it ends up being Gackle, who knows? I think that's you're kind of okay to piece that together if you know you're getting some consistency from starters number 1 and starters number 2. And I want to just clarify that just because it hasn't looked the way that we wanted it to look yet does not mean it won't look that way in the postseason. And I'm not saying to have blind faith in these guys and just, oh yeah, they're going to figure it out. They're going to crush it. Don't even worry about it. But I come back to, would you really trade this pitching staff for any of those pitching staffs I just showed you? Maybe you would. And honestly, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this, honestly, like, because I think there's a case to be made of course, like maybe 2022 where you had a guy in Connor Noland who didn't have the talent that these guys have, but you knew he had the winning mindset. You knew he had the strike throwing. You knew he was going to get you deep into the game. Maybe you guys would prefer that. And so I'll hear you out. But like, if you just look at the big picture, it's really hard to find a pitching staff Arkansas's had that had more options, that had more talent, that had better stuff, and that had guys that honestly are some of the most talented arms we've seen ever at Arkansas. And hell, I didn't really talk about some of these other circle of trust options, like a Christian Fouch is a guy that we haven't really talked about a ton. He's another guy where it's like, we've all known what he's capable of. We're just now starting to see it on a consistent level. It's time for him to step up and be that guy. Gabe Gackle, I feel like he gave a couple home runs the other day. I feel like he has turned that corner and he's gotten back to being the guy he was last year. I think this bullpen role suits him a little bit better. I think he's going to be a huge weapon for Arkansas in the postseason. And then you just kind of go on down the board. Like, I think Arkansas's lefties in this season are better than any of the lefties they've had, even better than the Evan Taylor and Zach Morris year, even better than Stone Hewlett and Barker Coyle last year. Obviously not better than Hagen Smith, but I'm talking about their bullpen guys. And I think they're righties. I mean, hell, Will McIntyre was on 7 of these circle of trust lists that we showed. He's right back in there the same. Dylan Carter's pitching the best he's ever pitched in his career. Ben Bybee's also got some pretty good stuff. And I think Christian Fauch and Gabe Gackle and Aiden Jimenez, some of those guys in there, like, I like the options with this pitching staff. I like the top level, like, potential. And of course, potential is just, a fake word that we all make up. It's just a buzzword, really. But I think it does apply. Like, I think there is a very high ceiling for this group, and we'll see if they're able to kind of get closer to that ceiling. Of course, you're not gonna get the best possible scenario out of all these arms, but I think if you look at the group, there's a path to us looking back and being like, damn, this might have been the best pitching staff Arkansas's had in this last decade here, which is what we were saying preseason. So there was a lot of pushback, because of course, anytime that, and Dave always gets himself in trouble. Anytime Dave says something at a press conference, it immediately gets proven wrong. Like in 2022, he's like, oh, dude, I know we're going to hit. And they got off to a slow start offensively. I think it was last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago. Maybe it was 2023. He was like, oh, this pitching staff totally going to be great. And then you saw it kind of all fall apart. And he did the thing this year where he was like, hey, our hitting coach is pretty good. Right after that, they lose their next 3 series, and allowed a lot of people to dunk on him and stuff like that. But a lot of times, we spoke about this the other day, that, you have weirdos like me that are like, hey, this might be the deepest Razorback pitching staff ever. This might be the most talented Razorback pitching staff ever. And so then every time they give up a run, we have the mob come out and they're like, I thought this was supposed to be a good pitching staff. And really what I wanted this exercise to portray for you guys is they are a lot closer to being that bona fide best pitching staff in school history than I think we realize, and maybe even more than some of the numbers would indicate too. Although Arkansas does rank pretty high. I mean, they're top 20 nationally in ERA, top 10 nationally in strikeout rate, top 10 in walks, top 10 in whip. Like, they actually do stack up pretty well with some of their peers. But I think even when you compare it to some of these past Arkansas teams, I think you guys would probably agree that you have a little bit more trust in a lot of these options than maybe you did in some of those past years. But does Arkansas have that frontline guy? Like, is Zach Root going to go on this Hagen Smith type of run? I don't know. Is he going to be as good as Blaine Knight? I don't know. But I think when you look at the group overall, it stacks up pretty well. And so let me know what you guys think and where you think this pitching staff ranks compared to some of those other ones. I'd also, because I'm sure there's going to be some of you that are like, you know what? Looking back on it, that 2021 staff wasn't that bad, or 2024, they weren't that bad. So interested to hear you guys' thoughts, and look forward to hearing from you guys as always. And I appreciate you guys tapping in with the Baumbastic Podcast. This episode went a little bit longer than I planned, which is a consistent theme, as you guys know. We'll be back tomorrow. By tomorrow, when we do the podcast, we will have an idea of who Arkansas is playing on Friday. And so that'll be nice. And we'll have a look at maybe some of the rest of the brackets. Maybe we'll talk about some of these other games that are going on. But I appreciate you guys for tapping in. We'll be back tomorrow. It's been another brilliant edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. Let's have a great day, everybody.